Russians did not have an offensive, right? They've not succeeded. They've not achieved anything. They've been fighting for Bakhmut now for more than almost 6-7 months. Bakhmut has become a black hole for them. They've lost thousands of their soldiers and military equipment, and they've achieved nothing. So from this perspective, the counteroffensive or offensive depends on the speed at which we receive the military support. It depends on other factors as well.
Strikes on Ukraine by the Putin regime have continued this week, with bombing across cities including Kyiv, Dnipro and Uman, killing at least 25.
Officials in Kyiv are reportedly gearing up for a counter-offensive. And let's get more now from Yuriy Sak. He's an advisor to Ukraine's defence minister, and he's here with us in our London Bridge studio in military fatigues. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning, Dalim.
The Sunday Times covers what's been happening in Ukraine very closely, and the headline above Mark Galiotti's piece this week is Ukraine isn't ready for its big offensive, but it has no choice. Would you see that as being a fair summary?
If you see what our top military and political leadership is saying, we are almost ready. This is what our Minister of Defense, Alexei Reznikov, said just 2 days ago. We are almost ready. But our president yesterday highlighted again that our readiness for the counteroffensive, or should we even say offensive, because Russians did not have an offensive, right? They've not succeeded. They've not achieved anything. They've been fighting for Bakhmut now for more than almost 6-7 months. Bakhmut has become a black hole for them. They've lost thousands of their soldiers and military equipment, and they've achieved nothing. So from this perspective, the counteroffensive or offensive depends on the speed at which we receive the military support. It depends on other factors as well, like weather conditions. It depends on, but as far as our moral attitude, we are determined, we are prepared. So it's just a matter of choosing the right moment. Plus, we have to understand that counteroffensive or offensive is not an event that will begin at the blow of the whistle. It's a very complex military operation which consists of smaller parts. Some of them have already begun. So we need to bear that in mind as well.
Obviously, you can't, you won't want to tell us exactly how ready you are for the offensive, as you put it. But what is the level of the supply that you have been promised by allies in NATO and elsewhere?
Well, we, as you've rightly pointed out, we do not reveal the amount of weapons and weapon systems that we are receiving from our allies. Everything we receive goes straight to the battlefield and is deployed and used very efficiently. What we have to also remember is that this is the most intense warfare since the end of the Second World War. The amount of ammunition that is being used on a daily basis is staggering. The amount of airstrikes that the enemy is launching is staggering. So this is why, we are almost ready, almost prepared. But you've also rightly said, that for us, it's a war of survival. It's a freedom war for us. So from this perspective, we have no other choice. Our objective remains unchanged. We need to liberate our lands because, as you have seen, while we continue talking to our partners and allies about the provision of more air defense systems, fighter jets, the enemy strikes. And the latest strike on Uman, missile strike, in one building, 6 children were killed. Yeah. Now, this needs to stop.
I wanted to ask you about fighter jets because we know it's been a topic of conversation. There's been wrangling or pleas repeatedly for more support on that front. Where are you currently with Western allies supplying you what you're asking for?
We wake up and we go to bed with the same mission with this in this regard. We understand that, in NATO, and well as in the US military doctrine, it is written in black and white that any offensive or even defensive operations can only be successful if there is air superiority and air dominance. Now, so our allies cannot expect us to do what they would never have done themselves. Just think about the operations like Desert Storm. The amount of fighter air power that was used before the land operations began was staggering, right? Look, around the world at the moment, there are more than 4,000 F-16s. There are available spare parts. F-16s is the most universal platform, which will improve our air defenses, which will make it possible for us to carry out ground operations with better success and fewer losses. So we are just, from 4,000, we are asking, 40. This is 1%. This is not a very high price, as we can see, for the sort of...
But you also need the pilots, the support crew and the parts, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. And of course, we understand that fighter jets are a bit more complex than that probably like howitzers or other weapon systems. It's a capability that requires infrastructure, training, engineers, like you rightly said. For every F-16, for every one pilot, you will need about 25 engineers to make sure that it is maintained, serviced, and rearmed.
And is that, what's holding it up? Is that the problem?
Well, in a way, this is why we were asking our allies, let's begin the pilot training. It could have begun a long time ago, and by now we would have had sufficient number of air pilots as well as engineers ready for this action. But plus also don't disregard the option of, we have an international legion in Ukraine, right? These are volunteers who are fighting for freedom shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainian soldiers. There are F-16 pilots around the world who have already expressed their willingness to come and join this war for freedom on the side of Ukraine. So there are things we can do to speed up the process, even though we understand it's not going to happen overnight.
You mentioned Bakhmut, and there's no doubt that in holding it or not allowing Russia to take it, it's been a military success, and Russia's lost a lot of people doing it. You've lost a lot as well, haven't you?
It's a war. There are losses on both sides, but our losses are considerably smaller because we are fighting a smart war. We are not using our soldiers as cannon fodder.
Well, what do you say to those who say that in Bakhmut you are using your soldiers as cannon fodder?
Well, we are not. That's for sure. And we've never used our army as cannon fodder, and this is what sets us apart from the terrorist state Russia.
What is the possibility for this offensive? I mean, again, you can't give us details, but it's not feasible that you're going to be able to push Russia out everywhere, is it?
Well, that's our objective, and we will not stop unless Russians are out of our territory, including from Crimea. That's been made very clear. This is part of our peace plan, which was announced by President Zelensky. We have seen what happens when you appease the aggressor. In 2014, Russia annexed illegally Crimea. They've moved into Donbass. Now, here we are. 2023, we are fighting a war of an unseen, unprecedented magnitude. We must not appease the aggressor. We all have to understand that the only way to end this war is to equip Ukrainian army sufficiently enough so that we can defeat the enemy on the battlefield, bring the perpetrators of these war crimes to account, set up an international war crimes tribunal, and show the world that we live in a international environment where rules-based international order will be respected.
Because some Western powers have suggested that a compromise position could be reached where Crimea was not part of this peace plan, that ultimately you would have to surrender it to the Russians in order to end this war. You're saying that will never happen? That
will never happen, and this is a miscalculation, and we are talking to our partners, and most of the time we see that they understand that, if you allow Russia to keep an inch of our land, this will be a time bomb ticking and it will explode in the future. We all are interested in making sure that we end this war now once and for all, and we restore stability in Europe, because this is not just about Ukraine, right? This is not about Crimea. This is about the international order, about the stability and peace in Europe and worldwide.
Well, let's talk about the international order, because China is a really interesting case here. I mean, we know that the Chinese leader has met with President Putin, called him a dear friend, but President Zelensky also met with Xi Jinping this week. Do you trust China? Do you believe in their so-called neutrality, in their warmer words towards Ukraine?
When it comes to our relationships with all our international partners, we try to be pragmatic. So when it comes to our relationship with China, first of all, we hope that China will not start, for example, providing Russia with weapons, and we don't see any signs that this is going to happen. Second of all, and this is a very important point, China is a strong voice when it comes to deterring Russia from even contemplating the use of nuclear weapons, because this has been discussed often, and we understand that, when Russia hears these signals from not just the Western countries, but also from countries like China and India, that any even contemplation of the use of nuclear weapons will result in catastrophic consequences for Russia. So that's an important part where China will play a role. And of course, China is a big country. It's a large economy. They cannot just stand aside. So we will see, the dialogue has begun. This dialogue has not resulted in any concrete outcomes or results yet, but we will continue to talk to China, and we hope that China will be a force that will help us end this war on our terms.
But you say, I mean, China obviously hasn't supplied weapons directly, but it has supplied components which can be used in military technology.
Well, this is part of the discussion. We are talking not just to China, because we are seeing that Russians are finding loopholes in the international sanctions regime, which allow them to pretty much continue to produce missiles, continue to produce weapons. So, of course, talking to our partners about closing down these loopholes and making sure that Russia is not able to maintain their defense industry base is part of the discussion.
It sounds like what you're saying is that this is going to drag on for a very long time, this military conflict, and be extremely costly.
Well, I don't think there's anything in what I've said that suggests that we are looking at this as a long, drawn-out conflict. Moreover, we are
But you're looking for total victory, and you're not looking for a settlement before that.
Well, yes, and we are confident that this total victory can be achieved soon if the military assistance is continued, sustained.
Really, over what sort of time period?
Well, 2023 is a decisive year. We don't want this to drag on for longer than 2023. So this is why, it is important that the NATO summit, for example, that will happen in Vilnius in a couple of months' time in July. Now, the allies have to make the decision about providing Ukraine with fighter jets, with F-16s, because this will make everything possible. We have seen that, impossible becomes possible. It just takes a bit longer. So we want to end this war soon, because none of us, not just Ukraine, but no member of the international community is interested in allowing this to become a frozen war, because this will result in the continuance of the threat of the global food crisis, if you have seen with the grain deal. This will result in the continuing of the nuclear blackmail with all the, the troubles that Russians are doing and war crimes that they're committing on our nuclear power plants. So this is not in the interest of anyone to allow this war to become a frozen war.
But at the same time, it could go that direction, couldn't it? Again, the Sunday Times article today reporting that both sides are running short of ammunition, and that the rate of use of ammunition is faster than the rate of production in Russia or in the United States. And Russia appears to be digging into defensive positions. All of that just means it's going to go on longer and more bloodily, doesn't it?
Our president yesterday, Mr. Zelensky, said it very clearly that, of course, this is possible if we slow down, if we are as allies at the coalition of free nations, if we are complacent, if we don't step up our efforts. But at the same time, we've mentioned ammunition production. The production of ammunition in Europe and in the US has already been, ramped up. And mind you, I would like to say that we are very thankful to the United Kingdom for the support that we have received so far. It's been tremendous.
Ask you, do you ever feel, just finally, do you fear that there might be some complacency from the British government?
From the British, I think we are so grateful, because the British government has been so supportive of Ukraine, training of Ukrainian soldiers, the receipt of military equipment. I mean, we are confident that had Britain have F-16s, Ukraine would have had them by now. So this is why our president, when he met with the National Security Advisor, Mr. Barrow, in Kyiv just a few days ago, our president has asked that the British government can take leadership in the formation of the aviation coalition, fighter jet coalition for Ukraine. This is what the UK has done with the tanks. The United Kingdom was the first country to commit itself to providing Ukraine with Challenger 2 tanks. So now we hope that the UK will consider becoming a leader in forming the aviation coalition as well, because it is critical at this stage of the war.
Yuriy Sak, advisor to Ukraine's Defence Ministry, thank you very much indeed, and your colleague as well, for coming in
Thank
to
you.
see us.